Yep, I league started a meme build in Path of Exile Harvest, and I know what you're thinking. For clearing my first map of the league, this doesn't look half bad, does it? So if you want to show your imaginary friends how much of a unique snowflake you are, even on day 1 of the league, I got a few tips for you that I learned from how I league started Mjölner, without hating myself. Feel free to subscribe for more Path of Exile content, and let's get started. Tip number 1, have a good leveling spec. I'm convinced you can league start almost anything in Path of Exile's softcore trade. Of course, hardcore and SSF are a bit more limited in choices. And depending on your choice, you might need a few days of planning a slightly different leveling spec before you can engage in the memes. For my Mjölner Chieftain, that meant leveling with Purifying Flame, which I muled from a Templar at level 1, until I bought a Wave of Conviction from another player for 2 alterations, because Marauder does not get the Fist to Fire spell gems, even though it does have the Fist to Fire ascendancy. Anyway, what I meant to say is, you want your leveling spec to be a proven and strong one. Like, for example, Wave of Conviction. But at the same time, do not stray too far away from what you would want to play, because most people enjoy leveling with their endgame build, or at least something close to it. But do make sure you can get all the gems required. Wave of Conviction linked to Combustion, Fire Penetration and Added Fire, because Marauder does get all those gems fairly early on, allowing me to not stop and trade too often and just level through the campaign as fast as I personally can. Number 2. Know your weaknesses. When starting a meme build, you will need more detailed planning of your leveling process and know how to make up for those reasons that definitely exist why your build is not considered viable or an OP spec. Know what potential problems you might encounter with your leveling and endgame spec so that you can make some clever choices and build around it. In my Mjölner example, the attribute requirements are the big downside of the build. Strength and intelligence rolls will use up many of the suffix slots that I would normally be able to use for resistances. On top of that, I want to use Cyclone, which also needs a decent amount of dexterity. By taking Chieftain as my ascendancy, I get to use Tassalio Cleansing Water to gain a casual 110% fire resistance from my Merc lab alone. On top of some resists from the tree, this allows me to completely ignore fire resistant as a stat on my gear, and in turn enables me to meet the attribute requirements of the build by using my suffixes for that, and also grabbing some stats on the tree. Number 3. Do some economy research. One of the upsides of meme builds can be that their gear is usually inexpensive, since demand for the gear of niche builds is usually not as high. And especially so on League Start, where most people focus on starting an OP meta build, you can sometimes get some good deals. And for other items, you can even get good deals all league round, because no one plays that build. Because who buys a Mjölner on day 1? Well, I did. For 2 chaos, and that is immensely cheap for the power that item provides. Much cheaper than, for example, 2-handed leveling uniques currently are that you could use for entry-level mapping, despite Mjölner actually being a lot stronger than most of these items, as well as a lot rarer. So do your research on early market situations and make sure you can afford what you need. Think outside the box where needed. For example, if I wanted to fix my attributes using an Astra Mentis, it would have cost me 20 chaos on day 1, which I couldn't afford. Now I geared up my character with a 5 link, a corrupted Cephal's frame for some extra physical mitigation, for a total of 7 chaos orbs, plus of course the gear I self-found while leveling and some stuff I crafted with Harvest. You can check out the path of building in the description below, but you will see my gear is pretty shit. But the build still works for mapping quite well in wide maps so far. So be smart about your gear choices, be flexible and watch the economy. Number 4. Not meta, but viable. As with any meme or off-meta build, do not overdo it. You can only fit so many memes and off-meta choices into a build before it goes from being slightly behind the curve to completely bad. Many people try to stuff so much into their meme builds, wanting to realize all those cool interactions in a single build, that it is easy to get carried away. So while I want to make this a Mjölner RF build eventually, but if I try to cramp in RF there as well this early, I would have probably failed. So make sure your meme build is viable and works. To do so, you can even test it in standard before you level into it. And tip number 5, league start is less important for the average person than you might think. I know the main reason why most people do not league start off meta specs. They are afraid to fail their league start and ruin their whole league. I do think for the average non-racer person who plays a limited number of hours per day, getting a league start advantage is probably less important and less likely than most people make it out to be. Of course, getting to maps day 1 and being the first to do endgame is one of the best ways to make a crap ton of currency. But when you are playing 2 hours a day and enjoy sleeping, that's not going to be you. Slow and steady progress is where money is made for us working class exiles. When I farmed up currency for a headhunter in Metamorph, I started out in a private league, then converted to Metamorph Trade, which caused my Atlas to be bugged out for 3 weeks, making me unable to progress through the mapping system. This was probably the objectively worst league start I ever had, in terms of progressing speed. Yet it was one of my wealthier leagues to date. And in my opinion, this goes to show that slow and steady wins the race as far as normal average Joes are concerned when it comes to the economy. So make a build that you know will be good, or choose one from a build guide. Make very specific leveling plans, and then play the game, don't stop playing, and be efficient with the time you have. And with that said, I do hope you are enjoying Harvest League and had a wonderful league start. A big thanks to all my Patreon supporters. I'm Yoji, and I will see you in the next update.